I'm Robin Holder, and I've been focusing for 20 years specifically on creating imagery that explores and demonstrates and expresses um, aspects of identity conflicts in our society, and specifically conflicts that have to do with race, religion, class, national origin, language, ethnic group. And I've incorporated since the late 1990s text in my imagery with the idea of motivating and instructing and expressing conversations that are very difficult to have because we believe ourselves, specifically in the Northeast and in New York City, to be very embracing of differences and very knowledgeable, when in fact we are quite ignorant. And there are manifestations and demonstrations of passive aggressive, institutionalized, embedded historic racism and discrimination in all of us, whether we want to admit it or not. So my goal is to create imagery that's somewhat inviting on a certain level, that hopefully people can connect with and engage with. But as you go into the layers of the image and you look at the text, you see that there are revelations of extraordinarily painful things that you did not know about, or you were not aware of, or you did know about but just didn't know how to deal with, or it was the elephant in the room that you weren't really able to address. And I believe that the only way that we can get through this is to begin to become aware of the realities that many of us, particularly people of color and immigrants, have to deal with. So my background as a biracial American really kind of gives the obsession for doing this, because I always lived in many different kinds of layers of society. So home is 54 inches by 44 inches, and it's one of my more recent pieces. I created it in early or late, I think it was 2019, and it's part of a group of works called Access and Inequities. I hear you, do you see me? So it's really all about urban living, the fact that really everybody is suffering. The gentrifiers, so to speak, are suffering, and the people who are losing their communities because of gentrification are suffering. And it has a lot to do with diversity in large cities, and the fact that particularly in New York City, we live literally on top and underneath and next to each other in large apartment buildings. So we're living in these spaces that really are kind of like almost cocoons in a way. I know people who live in a building and really don't know anything about their closest neighbors, don't really know the realities that the people who are living in the same architectural structure are experiencing. And particularly when you get into situations where you have buildings that are free market buildings, and it also include rent controlled or rent stabilized units. So you get this really, really visceral dynamic of a difference in class. So the idea of using home or house as a structure, which I have used in the past with my United States of Anxiety USA series, and I had used with my Behind Each Window a Voice series, which I was able to do with a grant from the Brooklyn Arts Council, thankfully, has to do with home, because home is the foundation of how we understand who we are and who we belong to and who we're not and who the other people are. And has a lot to do with what other people we feel comfortable with or we feel an affinity with, and what other people we feel are very remote or we don't really understand or know anything about them, or that they are presenting some sort of enemy status, actually. In the image, I have one prominent text that gives an example of what I'm trying to express about really not understanding the reality of others. Is I had an art residency in a public school in the Bronx for about 8 years. And I had a wonderful, wonderful woman who volunteered actually to be my assistant. She came every single day. We had a room in the building, a classroom that was turned into an art studio. She was very art literate. I knew that she was from Peru, and I worked with 2 of her kids who were in, I believe at the time, 2nd and 4th grade. And she would tell stories about her family. I would tell stories about my family. But then one day I said, I really don't even know how Lourdes got here to New York. So one day I said, Lourdes, ¿cómo es que tú llegaste aquí a Nueva York? How did you get here to New York? And she said, I walked. So she explained to me that she had gone by land from Lima, Peru to New York City and was able to not get raped and not have her children kidnapped. But what had happened was, the way she described it was literally like from one day to the next, the government changed and her husband was in peril. So he just had to disappear. He came to the Bronx because he had a brother who owned a home in the Bronx. And she had to she was an elementary school teacher. She had to tie up all her affairs, the family affairs, pack up the house, deal with her relatives, get the kids ready, but they did not, I can't remember what was the reason why she could not fly. So I think it was that it took her something like 5 months, and she went by truck and train and bus and walking from Lima, Peru to Bronx, New York City. So these are the kinds of things that you can be alongside a person. You could do business with a person every day in your neighborhood, somebody who has the fruit stand or the cleaners. You could pass somebody who walks their dog every day, say hello to them, but you actually have absolutely no reality, understanding of the reality they live in, and they don't really know that much about you. So that's what that piece Home is all about, is we're all over in there. It starts with a series of colored pencil drawings, actually very small, that I did. And many of them are actual people. Some of them are faces that I got from the internet, and I sort of combine them with features from other faces, because the idea is to kind of mix up these faces, these portraits. And I photograph my colored pencil portraits, and I photograph small textural handmade prints that I've made with lithographic inks and stencils. And then I digitally merge and collage them, and then I have them printed large, as large format archival inkjet prints, and then I draw and paint on top of them. So it's a layered process, but it's a way that I can create imagery that's larger than what I could actually physically manage myself at this point in my life. So that's the piece Home. It's about its home. It's the house, the beginning of understanding that we are part of a community, and it's really our job to explore and understand that community. And more importantly, I think than anything, it's really everybody's responsibility to learn how to ask those difficult questions and practice listening to the answers. Okay, now the other piece is a combination of, I believe it's some 30 odd figures that are in positions of falling, different ways of falling, and they have faces in them. And so, of course, the face represents the human endeavor, the human dynamic, all of us, and hopefully people who see it will get an idea that it's a group of diverse faces, young, old, male, female, Native American, Asian, Caucasian, African American, Latino, And I play around with that a lot. And when I draw my faces, is I try to take parts of what are typically understood as certain features from certain groups of people and merge them with facial features of other groups to see if it kind of conveys something unusual, or, because in a way it's almost like probably the only way we'll get past racism is to mix ourselves up so much that everybody is some sort of undefinable mixed race human being. But the idea is because of a number of complex social, political, cultural reasons, our society really is in a free fall. And we are losing rapidly, if not having already lost, any kind of dream that we had about accessing what we call the great American middle class life, which I think actually really only occurred after World War II for a certain demographic of people, mainly Caucasian, wonder-bred American people. So the idea of America being a place where you can invent yourself, where you could succeed, where you could create a comfortable life for you, your parents, your children. You could educate your children. You could take care of your parents in your old age. That's pretty much gone for most Americans, I think, at this point. So it's that feeling of the whole myth. I call it a myth. Some people call it a right or a privilege of being an American. I've always known that it really depended on what demographic you were in, how you could access that middle class life. And of course, whatever is happening here in the United States is also resonating worldwide on different levels. And then at the same time, we're in a very bizarre situation because many of us are in some ways victimized and in other ways we're empowered. So it's not like we're just victims. It's not like we're just entitled. It's a bizarre mixture of having access and not having access. I think my work addresses whatever futuristic urban society that we could have or might structure or build or expand, really for us in the United States and for us in New York City, really has a lot to do with, I believe we need to really think communally, which Americans are really not good at. Americans are very individualized and very independent, which is admired in some respects around the world. But in terms of where we are now, it is really undermining us. That independence is not healthy. The fact that I really think we need to listen, and that is not also a natural American trait. Americans are trained to express themselves, articulate, have a voice, but we are not good listeners. And listening has a lot to do with suspending your own ego. Listening has to do with quieting the thoughts that you have and trying to ingest the expression or the articulation of another human being in a way that you should have questions after that will help you to delve deeper into what it is they are not saying. Because a lot of times the important information is not in what a person says, but what they are not exactly saying. And so I think we need to have more humility, and we really need to learn how to collaborate. Now, my experience in arts, in culture, is usually there isn't any real collaboration. It's about whoever's paying or funding the project gets the basic platform, they create it, they structure it, and they fill in the blanks. So, I really think we're really sort of like slightly deluded about who and what we are and who and what we've been doing. So I think that hopefully my work gives a segue into group discussion, group acknowledgement, group exploration, group learning. And I know that the more work that I do, the more questions that I ask, and the more that I'm able to listen, which really is not easy, to others, the humbler I become, and the more I can formulate more investigation. So that's what I hope my work serves a function for.
Absolutely.
And I just keep doing it until I can't do it anymore.